Hello guys, good morning everybody. Welcome to our YouTube channel. I hope I am audible, and if I am audible, just let me know. Good morning everybody. Kanika, I am fine. You tell. Right. Okay, so we're gonna start the session for today, right? So this is our front page news that we have, and I think this is the most important one, and it is related to, let's say, as you can see over here, in relation to Supreme Court sets October 31st for the hearing of electoral bonds case. Now these electoral bonds have been in the news very lately, and it has been a very important topic of discussion as well, right? So let's try to discuss this particular topic of electoral bonds a little in detail so that you guys have an idea related to electoral bonds, right? So let's try to discuss. And if you know anything related to electoral bonds, then you would be kind enough, then if you want to add something, you can write in the comment box as well, right? और वो कहते हैं ना, नॉलेज जितनी बांटो उतनी कम होती है, ठीक है. Now let's try to discuss the electoral bonds, right? So first of all, when we talk about electoral bonds, what was the reason, first of all, that why they were introduced? We will discuss what are electoral bonds, let's say, but first of all, we need to know what is the background, or let's say, I think today there is some problem with this note, right? Let me check. Guys, just give me 1 minute. Let's say we are saying ये notepad चल पड़े, right? So it would be better कि ना अगर हम screen पे लिख के उसे करें, that would be better, right? Okay. No, it is not. चलिए. Now, let's try to discuss electoral bonds. I think there is some problem with this notepad, right? Okay. So guys, we will do one thing. I think there is certain problem that is coming with the note, right? So might not you let me see one more time. Okay, why this notepad is not working? Just give me 1 minute, right? Let's try to see why this note is not working. Otherwise, it would have been better if I had been able to use the board, right? Then you guys would have been able to understand it better. Okay, let's try to see. So the thing that we were discussing was electoral bonds, and one of the main thing that we need to know is what was the background that for which this electoral bonds have been reduced. I think सबको पता है, जो बिल्कुल बेसिक है, जो electoral bonds release let's say scheme introduce करी गई थी, it was basically done in relation to, let's say, donations that are given to political parties. So I can say background is in context of relation of donation to political parties. Now, before this electoral bond scheme, there used to be a particular, let's say, अगर हम बात करें, सीधा सीधा cash donations होती थी, right? So before electoral bonds, we had cash donations, right? And when we talk about कि जब cash donations होती हैं, then there is a lot of chances that it might be resulting in corruption, or let's say a lot of black money is also involved when we talk about this particular aspect of cash donations, right? So as a result, government wanted to bring in certain accountability for the payments or the donations that are being received by the political parties. So as a result, this particular idea was conceived, which is known by the name of electoral bonds. Now what happens under electoral bonds? Let's try to understand. See, earlier, if I had to make any donation to a political party, I could have done through this particular cash method. Now, under the electoral bonds, there is certain authorized branches of State Bank of India. Very important. So, first question comes, who can issue this electoral bonds? So, these are the authorized branches of State Bank of India that can issue electoral bonds. Now, let's say I'm a person that wants to donate some X amount of money to a political party. So I will not be going with the cash directly to a political party. Rather, let's say I would have certain money, I would deposit it in SBI bank, and SBI will give me an electoral bond, right? Now they would be giving me an electoral bond. Now that electoral bond that I would be receiving comes in certain denominations. Now what are those denominations? Let's try to understand. The denominations under which electoral bonds are issued are like this, like 10,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, and finally the fifth denomination is 1 crore, right? ठीक है, देख लेना मैं कोई जीरो इधर उधर ना कर दूं, right? So then we have the 1 lakh 1 crore denomination. So these are the five denominations that we have in which electoral bonds are being released. So the minimum donation that a particular person can do to a particular political party is of the denomination of 1,000. So I am a person that wanted to give certain donation to a political party, so I went to a particular SBI branch and I deposited, let's say 10,000, and in result of that I got an electoral bond. Now one thing you need to understand, bond क्या है? एक तरह का piece of paper है जिसके अंदर लिखा है कि this particular piece of paper is entitled कि आप इसको अपने कैश में डाल सकते हो या अपने अकाउंट में विड्रॉ कर सकते हैं. Let's say if it goes to any political party and that particular thing would be credited to their particular bank account. But one thing you need to understand, there would be no mentioning of the name of the person who has in the first instance deposited that money to the SBI branch. So what is the particular issue that now comes with the electoral bonds that have been a cause of concern as well? कि यहां से जो एक चीज बड़ी problematic हो रही है, that is now there is anonymity which is surrounded with who is giving the money to political parties. This is a serious concern that is there. ये प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती है कि पैसा आ रहा है, वो तो इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया को भी पता है, ठीक है, कि कितना पैसा कितनी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी के पास गया है. प्रॉब्लम इस कंटेक्स्ट में नहीं है, प्रॉब्लम इस कंटेक्स्ट में है कि कौन पर्सन है जो डोनेट कर रहा है, राइट? सो देयर आर सर्टेन केसेस दैट देयर माइट बी सर्टेन प्राइवेट बिजनेस ग्रुप्स और बिजनेस टाइकून्स ऑफ इंडिया दैट आर बेसिकली फेवरिंग अ पॉलिटिकल पार्टी एंड दे आर डोनेटिंग अ पर्टिकुलर अमाउंट टू दैट पर्टिकुलर पार्टी. सो पॉलिटिकल पार्टी की अगर हम बात करें, यहां पे अगर हम बात करें, फेवरेटिज्म का कंसेप्ट आ सकता है किसी पर्टिकुलर बिजनेस के थ्रू. अगर हम बात करें, बायसनेस आ सकती है, राइट? सो दीज आर सर्टेन कॉजेज ऑफ कंसर्न दैट आर देयर. अगर हमें एनोनिमिटी बनी रहेगी कि कौन डोनेट कर रहा है, इफ यू आर नोइंग द पर्सन हु इज डोनेटिंग, then everybody will get to know, right? So that you can also gauge the let's say policies of the government, whether they are favoriting a particular business group or not. So we can say is they can create favoritism as well. It can create favoritism and it can create biasness as well. So these are the two issues that is there with this particular electoral bonds. I hope you are able to get certain type of idea related to electoral bonds. Now one thing you need to understand is, when I talk about electoral bonds, let's say the day in which they are issued, they have to be encashed or credited within 15 days. ऐसा नहीं है कि मैंने आज एक particular SBI say, let's say I made a donation and they gave me electoral bond, I gave to a political party and they are encashing after 6 months. No, they have to encash within particular how much time frame? They have to encash within 15 days. So this particular electoral bonds have to be encashed or credited into the account within 15 days. So this is the, let's say, most important function that is there of the electoral bonds. Now the third question that becomes very important is, who is eligible for this particular funding or donation under this electoral bond scheme? कौन कौन सी political parties अगर हम बात करें इसके लिए eligible हैं? So this is also an important question that we need to know, that which are the parties which are eligible for the funding under electoral bonds. Now those parties, first of all, first condition is those who are registered political parties, and second thing is जिन्होंने previous election में, let's say they have secured around 1% of the votes, secured around 1% of the votes, those particular parties are eligible for donation under this particular electoral bonds scheme. So these are the three important things that we guys need to know कि पहले कैश में डोनेशन होती थी, अगर 2000 के ऊपर होती थी तो पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज को बताना पड़ता था, राइट? बट देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ, लेट्स से, केसेस ऑफ करप्शन, बहुत ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम्स थी जिसकी वजह से गवर्नमेंट लेके आई इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड स्कीम, सो दैट द इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया ऑल्सो नोज कि कितना पैसा कितने अकाउंट में आ रहा है पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज के. वो सब प्रॉब्लम ठीक है, बट एक जो चीज वहां पे लेट्स से कॉज ऑफ कंसर्न है, दैट देयर इज एनोनिमिटी दैट इज कंसर्न हु इज एक्चुअली डोनेटिंग. The problem is not with how much donation is coming, problem is who is that particular entity that is basically giving a donation to a political party, because it has the anonymity attached to that particular donor, right? And second thing is, it can lead to favoritism and biasness, right? So these are the problems that we have already discussed. Now the third thing we have discussed is electoral bonds have to be encashed within 15 days, and the third thing is that they have to be a registered political party, or the second thing is that it has to be, let's say, secured around how many votes? 1% of the votes. In addition to this, SBI, let's say, issues electoral bonds in the denomination of 1000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh and 1 crore. Now, ये तो सारा अगर हम बात करें all the detailed analysis that is there related to electoral bonds. But the most important question that comes to or haunt our mind is, what was the thing that was given in today's newspaper? So the thing in today's newspaper is, ये जो electoral bonds का scheme था, जो introduce करा गया था, क्या ये एक money bill है या finance bill है? Now one of the thing we need to understand is, जब हम money bill की बात करते हैं, it need not to be introduced in Rajya Sabha. It has to be introduced only in the Lok Sabha. So this is a big catch that is now being decided by the Supreme Court, whether the bill related to electoral bonds is a money bill or a finance bill. So this is the whole story that has come in today's newspaper, and we have tried to elaborate the concept of electoral bonds so that you are aware of this particular topic as well. And I'm telling you, these are the type of questions that generally come in मेंस एग्जामिनेशन, राइट? किसके अंदर आते हैं? मेंस एग्जामिनेशन के अंदर आते हैं फिजिबिलिटी ऑफ इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स. मे बी इन द प्रीलिम्स यू कुड बी आस्क्ड अबाउट द फीचर्स ऑफ द इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स, अबाउट द ब्रांचेस, अबाउट सर्टेन प्रीलिम्स फैक्ट्स, राइट गाइस? ओके, नाउ मूविंग टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट. Net direct tax collections up 21.8% to 9.57 lakh crore. So right, so they are talking about direct tax collection. I hope everybody knows what is a direct tax and what is an indirect tax. So direct tax वो होता है जहां पे जिसके ऊपर टैक्स लेवाई किया जा रहा है, that is a particular entity that has to pay the tax. A person on whom a tax is levied has to ultimately pay the tax. And when I talk about indirect tax, these are not the same person on whom the tax is levied and the person which actually is entitled to pay that particular tax. तो जितने भी हमारे जीएसटी टैक्स हो गए, एक्साइज ड्यूटी हो गई, कस्टम ड्यूटी हो गई, ये सारे क्या बन जाते हैं? हमारे इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स. और जब हम डायरेक्ट टैक्स की बात करते हैं तो इनकम टैक्स हो जाता है, कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स हो जाता है, वेल्थ टैक्स हो जाता है. सो दीज आर ऑल द फॉर्म्स ऑफ व्हाट वी कॉल इट एज डायरेक्ट टैक्स, राइट गाइस? चलिए, नाउ तो ये दो इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूज थी जो हमें पहले डिस्कस करनी थी, राइट? इशू आपको पता है इजराइल और गाजा वाला तो चल ही रहा है. नाउ दिस इज अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग आर्टिकल. दिस इज रिलेटेड टू वुमेन वांट चेंज, सोसाइटी नीड्स चेंज. नाउ लेट्स ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक. अब ये बड़ा ना इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक है बिकॉज इट हैज अ कोर रिलेशन एंड इट इज बेसिकली वी कैन से, जो कल हमने पढ़ा था ना नोबेल प्राइज के ऊपर, दैट वाज आल्सो रिलेटेड टू वर्क प्लेस में जो जेंडर गैप है. सिमिलरली वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमिक फोरम का 17th एडिशन आया है, किसका? ग्लोबल जेंडर गैप रिपोर्ट का. 146 कंट्रीज का डेटा होता है, ये हम सब देख लेते हैं, राइट? एंड इट हैज सेड कि जो अभी प्रोग्रेस चल रहा है, इट विल टेक अराउंड 131 years टू रिमूव दिस ग्लोबल जेंडर गैप एंड 149 years इन पॉपुलस साउथ एशियन कंट्रीज इंक्लूडिंग इंडिया. So this is the first starting point that we have of this particular article, and it is very important, right? So these are the direct questions that you can let's say we can say कि that directly come in mains examination, है ना? कि mains के अंदर indirect questions के अगर हम बात करें questions frame होते हैं. Now let's try to discuss this topic. What they are saying, World Economic Forum releases a report by the name of Global Gender Gap Report. Now this global gender gap report, it is the 17th edition that has recently come. Now what they are trying to say over here is that it will take around 149 years in the South Asian economies or countries to remove this gender gap. To remove this gender gap. And when I talk about gender gap, I think everybody is aware of what type of gap we are talking about. We are talking about social gaps, we are talking about financial gaps, we are talking about economic gaps, political gaps, all type of different dimensions you can add into this particular global gender gap. And one of the thing you need to understand is कि हमें ये remove करने भी जरूरी हैं, because if we want to achieve sustainable development goals as well, because there are certain sustainable development goals that basically talk about these particular inequalities that are quite prevalent in our society, in the country and in the world. What are those basically sustainable development goals? So I can say they have an overlap with this particular sustainable development goals, like gender equality, and second one is reducing inequalities, right? So these are the two types of sustainable development goals that could be achieved if we are able to remove this global gender gap. Now this article talks about, अगर हम इस global gender gap को खत्म करने की बात करते हैं, right? Workplace में तो अगर हम मान लीजिए कल हमने पढ़ा था जिनको नोबेल प्राइज मिला इकोनॉमिक्स के अंदर, she has clearly said that there is a lot of workplace gender gap that is there, and we discussed the reasons yesterday as well, because there is certain problems inherent in the society that, let's say, has a domino effect in the economic sphere as well, where we see women getting less opportunities in the economic sphere, whereby getting less wages, less opportunities, less promotions, and these are the certain cases that we have in the workplace. Now when we talk about in this particular scenario, let's try to understand in context of India. ठीक है, हम इंडिया की बात करते हैं. अगर मैं इंडिया की बात करूं, let's say what could be the positive that we can see that has been done in order to remove this gender gap, right? So first important thing we need to understand is recently there has been passing of Women Reservation Act. I think ये सबको पता है, जहां पे हमने बोला कि हम वुमेन को रिजर्वेशन प्रोवाइड करेंगे, 33% रिजर्वेशन इन लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज एंड इन स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर्स, राइट? सो दिस इज द पॉइंट दैट आई थिंक एवरीबॉडी इज अवेयर ऑफ, 33% reservation. But this particular thing will take a little time, because they have said only after delimitation, and maybe in the 2029 elections we can see the representation of women around 33%, right? So this is a particular scenario that we have already seen in this particular instance of providing opportunities and removing the gender gap. Now let's go back a little in our history, right? So this article talks about go back in our history, and there you would see why we have seen certain cases where there has been a lot of gender gap. Now what they are trying to say over here is that there are certain women who are privileged, there are certain women who are not that much privileged, and they come from a very humble background or from a very poor background. So they have basically tried to decode a one particular scenario that is in the case of round table conference, right? I think those who have been actively studying modern history, they might be aware of the importance of round table conference, because these were the genesis for the formation of Government of India Act 1935. Now when at the round table conference, let's say it was represented by women as well, right? So let's say there were two women who were prominently there. One was Begum Jahanara, right, and one was Sarojini Naidu. I think सबको पता है Sarojini Naidu, right? Now nothing against Sarojini Naidu, but the way, let's say, she represented herself at round table conference, she said there is no need for positive discrimination that is required for women. Actually what she was saying, that there is no need for reservation of women. So this was a particular thing that was advocated by Sarojini Naidu, that there is no need of reservation for women. This was a stance taken by Sarojini Naidu at round table conference. But when we talk about Begum Jahanara, who was a representative of Muslim League, said they need to have at least 5% reservation for women. How much reservation they are talking about? 5% reservation for women. So can you see different stances that have been taken by the women in our history depending upon the society they were basically brought up in, right? So she was from a very good background. She was not, let's say, from that particular elite background or let's say very good privileged background. So as a result, the demands were quite different. So one of the things that has been advocated in this article is कि अगर हमें एक्चुअली में देखने को मिल रहा है ग्लोबल जेंडर गैप, ऑब्वियसली क्वाइट एविडेंट भी है, तो हम ये तो कह ही नहीं सकते कि जेंडर गैप नहीं है. तो पहली चीज जो हमें समझनी चाहिए कि सिर्फ मेन ही नहीं है जिनको वुमेन के राइट्स के लिए स्टैंड अप होना है. इट इज द वुमेन हु हैज टू स्टैंड फॉर द राइट्स ऑफ द वुमेन इटसेल्फ, सो दैट वी कैन अचीव दिस पर्टिकुलर रिमूवल ऑफ ग्लोबल जेंडर गैप. I hope you are able to understand the context in which they have used this particular instance of roundtable conference, where they are trying to compare the different viewpoints of Sarojini Naidu ji and Begum Jahan Ara, who was a representative of Muslim League. And I'm telling you guys, this is how questions gets framed in UPSC. There could be a direct question: which of the following were the participants in the second session of roundtable conference, or which of the following women? So this is the direct prelims question. But you also get to have a mains point of view, or mains let's say perspective, that what is the issue that we have. So the most important thing that we need to understand is that if we want to raise the position of the women, we want to remove the gender inequalities, we want to, let's say, bridge this global gender gap, we have to understand that there has to be the change in society. अगर society में change होगा तभी ये चीजें change हो सकती हैं. Let's take a very basic example. One thing that needs to be done is, women shall be given the right to study, they shall be given the right to get the reservation, they shall be given the right, if we are talking about, to given the opportunities to get the right wages, equal wages for the equal work that their male counterparts are doing. Only then in the coming future we would be able to change this whole scenario. So it is about changing the mindset, it is changing the approach, and overall shift, or let's say overhaul of the system, if we really want to this particular achieve the objective of sustainable development goals. I hope this article makes sense to you and you have enough data that you can quote in your answers if you have to write any answer on global gender gap, and you can take inspiration from yesterday's news as well, where that particular female lady got the Nobel Prize in economics, right? Okay. So let me take your doubts. Okay. Chaliye. Now, moving to the next part. अब देखो, ये बड़ा ना इंटरेस्टिंग आर्टिकल है, अगर आप देख पा रहे हो, called Maldives Evolution of a Democracy. Now, what they are trying to say over here is, they are trying to talk about the situation of Maldives over here, right? किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? Maldives की. Now, one of the thing you need to understand is the new government that has come up, the new president, it is basically come up with a particular election manifesto that it will be not pro-India, but it would be anti-India or anti-India, right? So what is the recent rhetoric that has been announced by the new government of Maldives is, it is obviously, that is quite evident as well. We have discussed certain news as well in the past few days, that it is anti-India and pro-China, comma, pro-China. But one thing the Maldives is forgetting, that one thing they need to understand is that if they want to, yes, to go very close to China, then they have seen the situation of Sri Lanka, what happened to Sri Lanka, right? So Sri Lanka got closer to China, but what we have seen over here, now Sri Lanka had to face the worst debt crisis that it had ever faced in their, let's say, history, because unka debt trap ho gaya. So this is one of the problems that Maldives has to consider, that it can lead to the situations of debt trap. Second thing you need to understand is, Maldives think that they are very close to Gulf countries. Yes, there is a lot of investment coming from the Gulf countries in Maldives, but they are not understanding this particular point, that India is also now closer to the Gulf countries as well. India has also taken the steps. If you see in G20, we have announced a corridor that would run from India to Middle East to Europe, let's say, right? So as a result, India has also come closer to what? Gulf countries. So they cannot think that they could not have, let's say, relations with India, or they could be anti-India when India is having good relations with Gulf countries. थर्ड थिंग वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड इज, आज के टाइम पे अगर हम बात करते हैं, मान लीजिए ग्लोबल वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर है, और इस ग्लोबल वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर के अंदर तुम एक पर्टिकुलर कंट्री को आइसोलेट नहीं कर सकते हो. देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ टूरिज्म दैट इज गोइंग बिटवीन इंडिया एंड मालदीव्स. हमने देखा होगा कि हर बॉलीवुड एक्टर मालदीव्स भाग जाता है, राइट? सो दिस इज जस्ट फॉर द फन सेक, बट देयर इज अ वेरी मच कनेक्शन दैट वी हैव बिटवीन people of India and people of Maldives. A lot of people are coming over here, studying over here, right? So there is a very important people to people connect that we already have between India and Maldives. So these things cannot be neglected by the new government just on this particular thing, that they had declared in their manifesto that they would not be entertaining the Indian forces on their soil. So this is a one important thing we need to understand, and the Maldives also need to understand is that they cannot isolate India even if they want to go closer to China, because India is the voice of the global south. India is a new emerging hub of the world economy, and they cannot be isolating India when already India and Maldives have a lot of regional associations as well. Like if I can say, Maldives and India are part of BRICS, sorry, BRICS तो नहीं है, SAARC, BIMSTEC. I think everybody knows what is BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. And then you have Colombo Security Conclave, right? So this is also very much important. So these are the areas where we have mutual cooperation. So one thing they need to understand as well, that is Maldives, that we have a historic ties with India and they cannot be broken on this particular pretext that they want to be anti-India. Rather, they need to have a joint, let's say, balance, and they need to strike a balance between engaging with China and engaging with India as well if they have to continue for the betterment of their particular people. I hope this is very easy and you have already understood this particular article. ओके सो ये कुछ ऐसा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, ये हमने कल डिस्कस कर लिया था क्लॉडिया गोल्डिन के वर्क का, राइट? बाकी यही चीजें चल रही हैं पॉलिटिकल, सो नथिंग इंपॉर्टेंट, ठीक है? मोदी जी की नेतन्याहू से बात हुई है, कंडेम्स अटैक ऑन इजराइल. First test flight of Gagan mission scheduled on October 21. So good luck to our Gaganyaan mission. Hamas we have already discussed. This is the Palestinian militant group and we have already discussed. On the West Bank we have the Fatah group, that is the genetocracy that is being run by the old world, let's say old people, and this particular Hamas is a militant group, right? So it is a more radical and it is a political arm of the Muslim neighborhood or brotherhood, sorry, Muslim brotherhood that had its roots from Egypt, right? तो उसी के related है, इससे ज्यादा हमें पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है. IMF ने हमारा ग्रोथ फोरकास्ट को बढ़ा दी है, अच्छी बात है. एंड we are done with the today's analysis, right? I hope you are able to understand the today's analysis. These were the three important news that you need to remember. Electoral bonds, the second thing is women wants change, society needs to change, and third thing is related to India and Maldives, right? So let me export the PDF for you guys. If you have any doubt in the comment box, you can put your doubts. Can anyone tell me what's the date today? ठीक है यार, देखो डेट्स के रिलेटेड ना मैं ज़्यादा याद नहीं रहता है मुझे. 11 सॉरी, थैंक यू सो मच. There is one, I don't know who is that particular person who is commenting by the name of S, right? You write a lot of points, but can I know your full name? Yes. Guts to eat and Manpreet, thank you. Today is 11th. Okay, Simran. ठीक है जी. चलो. Thank you so much guys and we will see each other tomorrow, same time 9 AM. Till then, take care.